Well, Will Smith said we have to really be a little bit self-delusional to accomplish lots of things, and I think that might be true. At least we have to believe, but we have to believe enough that we can actually put the effort into it. If you're going to achieve something big, you have to believe you can, and in some cases, that may be a little delusional, such as for Farrah Gray, who got made $1 million by the time he was 14. Now he was young and he was just too stupid. No, he couldn't do that. But then he did that. So amazing things can be done, as he said, on the other side of fear. And if you don't know, you can't do it. And so that's more or less what Will Smith is saying too. You're going to accomplish amazing things. If you don't know, you can't. Before we move on to talking about the first habit, just again, a little reflection on this. I've set up, you may recall, for weeks 4, 5, and 6, you're not going to load those up as regular journal entries. You're going to accumulate those 3. So basically starting with this week's entries, you're not going to submit those separately. You're going to hold them and submit weeks 4, 5, and 6 all at the same time. By your deadline for that will be the 14th of November. So you have a little bit, well, we haven't had those weeks yet, so you can't write them yet. But as of the 14th of November, you should have submitted all 3 at one time into, let me get out of here and go to our Moodle site so you can see what it looks like. Under week 4, which is this week, oops. You see at the bottom of this week 4, peer review of entries 4, 5, and 6. By November 14th, students will have completed their journal entries 4, 5, and 6 and uploaded the text into the Moodle workshop. That's what we're looking at, the workshop right there. Workshop assignment under week 4, right where we're looking at it, in which peer review will occur beginning on November 15th and completed by December 1st. Students will be graded on the quality of their review of the submission of 5 other classmates, and 5 other classmates will review their submission, which will also be part of the assignment's grade. So this is worth up to 12% of the overall course grade, 2% for each review, each peer review that you do, and 2% for their review of you. We're using more or less the same criteria that is posted already at the top of our website for how you're going to be graded in your final journal entry. So your final journal compilation. So this assignment is to get you to think about it from a teacher's perspective a little bit, and to help you get feedback from a number of different people, and rather than just me or my assistant. So any questions on that? I presume you've never done one of these before, and I haven't either. So I think I have it set up properly, although it can't. I'm still getting an error message just because you guys haven't submitted the documents yet, which you can't because you haven't written them yet. But I think it's all set up okay. And if I understand it correctly, because I haven't done it before, that it will essentially send you 5 random student entries or the link to them for you to grade. So that seems to be the way it discusses it. I'll do a little more research and make sure I'm not wrong about that. But that's my understanding, is that they will send you a link or send somehow let you know who you're supposed to.
Any format for us to let others, or we just write about whatever the event.
Well, you're to make you will, as I understand it again, um, you are not required to by the system, but I would like you to make comments. You can make a comment for each person you're scoring, but you also have a number grade, and that's explained. The criteria and how you will score them is explained in the system. But it's good if you have some suggestions to make to them to go ahead and write that into the comment section as you're grading them. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Well, like I say, we'll be doing this together in a sense. So if we run into problems, we'll fix them when we get to them. Even if we have to change the deadlines or whatever we have to do, we'll make it work. Okay, let me go back to the PowerPoint. So we're going to proceed with the first habit of the 7 habits of highly effective people. We talked last week, though, kind of introduced it, talking about paradigms and principles. A paradigm we kind of compared to like having the right map to the right city, and if you have the wrong map, how difficult that would be. We also talked about principles, and Covey believes that principles are enduring, that they are universal, and I guess I'm don't want to put words in his mouth, but the best word I can think he or use to describe is that he thinks they're eternal. So universal and eternal principles to succeed by and to live by. He tells a story about an admiral in the U.S. Navy who his battleship. This probably isn't it exactly, but a battleship like this. He was. They were in dense fog, and this was back a number of years ago when some of their electronics were limited, and they used to use lights to flash to signal other boats the information they needed. And so as they were going through this fog, they saw this light in front of them, and they began flashing their light, a signal. The admiral had the signalman signal them, please turn aside. And he got the response, however, sorry, you turn aside. In other words, they saw this light coming straight at them. They didn't want to collide with them. And so they were telling them to turn aside, and they were telling them back, no, you turn aside. And so then the admiral was kind of upset about that, and he said, have them signal, we are a battleship, turn aside. And they got a signal back, again, you turn aside. And so now he's pretty angry, and so he demands again that they turn aside, and then he gets a signal back, you're a battleship, but we're a lighthouse. He said he compares the principles to that lighthouse, that it's there. There's nothing. The admiral may have been the highest ranking person in that part of the Navy, but he cannot force that lighthouse to move. It's kind of like he compares it also to the law of gravity, that just because the U.S. Congress or the Malaysian Parliament decides to pass a law um, doing away with the law of gravity, that doesn't work, right? It's not going to change it, no matter what they want. Uh, Congress or the Parliament are not going to change the law of gravity. So as we proceed, of course, everything that Dr. Covey teaches is based on these sorts of principles that he thinks, again, are universal, eternal, that all organized religions tend to support them, and for good cause, he believes, because they work. They actually work. A lot of the other, as I talked about before, a lot of the other books that have been written about success and so forth have gone away from those sorts of principles and instead taught very superficial things about how to smile and how to dress and all that sort of stuff that is not one of the principles that he bases the 7 habits on. Let me go back here. So this graphic again depicts his 7 habits. I talked about it a little bit last week, but down below you see 3 and what he calls the private victory. The be proactive, begin with the end in mind, and put first things first. Those are the 3 habits he says you need to ingrain in yourself in order to really be independent, to achieve independence. But then the higher achievements are achieved by interdependence, and the 3 habits that help you achieve that is think, win-win, seek first to understand, then to be understood, and then synergize. And then around the outside is sharpen the saw, which basically means refine everything you're doing and keep it sharp. That if you don't keep your tools sharp and so forth, you start wasting a lot of time. And so, in a sense, even when you're talking about your tools, your brain, your body, so forth, these are tools that you use to achieve success, and you need to take care of them. As you proceed up, you see that he begins in the black bars. He begins at the bottom as dependence. And I mentioned last week, everybody is dependent when we start off. We're all start off as babies, and there's in our particular species is not real good at taking care of ourselves when we're babies. Some animals do produce babies that pop out and are ready to go, but we don't do that. One of the weaknesses of the human species is that our babies are extremely dependent. But some people continue to be dependent even into all their lives, dependent on what other people think, dependent, always feeling like somebody else is responsible for their happiness. That's a type of dependence. Some of them are financially dependent for a variety of reasons. That they never, and it's not always, like a disability. Sometimes it's just laziness. Is a type of disability, I guess. Just there are lots of things that could make people dependent even into their older age, and emotionally dependent is certainly one of those. So as you go through these first 3 habits, the idea is you wean yourself of all that dependency and become independent in that sense, that you're not dependent on other people's how they see you. You're not dependent on people how they treat you necessarily. They might affect your life, but you learn to deal with it and and just say I'm in control, and we'll talk about that today. So he believes that the habits help you grow through this maturity continuum from dependency to independence, and then ultimately to interdependence, the greatest achievement of all, or how you can achieve the most, is in that state, interdependence, excuse me. So habit one is be proactive. Let me go back to that a second. So what is to be proactive? We think we talked about the other day, but again, what is it to be proactive? Anybody?
Be more uh,
Being more active, you certainly, well, you can be active and be reactive. So what's the difference between proactive and reactive? I mean, so there are a lot of reactive people that are very active. They very frequently are very angry people. They always have a problem with how other people are treating them, so and how other circumstances are treating them. So reactive people are active, but in a different way than proactive people. So any thoughts on what the difference is between a proactive person and a reactive person? Well, one of the ways you can think about it is animals are typically just reactive. So you may have heard of the experiments of Pavlov and the dogs, and how he discovered that if he would ring a bell and then feed them, they would associate in their minds the bell and the food. And if he rang the bell without the food, they would still start salivating. They would expect that food, and so they're reacting to that stimulus. Animals and people respond to other stimuli in a similar way. Sometimes it's an emotional outburst. If somebody, as I mentioned, if somebody's a dependent person, they expect people to be doing stuff for them, or they look at people doing stuff to them. And so a dependent person will say things like, if only my parents supported me more, I could be successful in school. Or if only the teachers taught right, I could get A's. If only, you just, whatever, you fill in the blanks, if only. They're always looking for an excuse to why they're not achieving what they want to achieve. It's always somebody else's fault. And so they're always reacting to something rather than thinking proactively, what can I do to accomplish what I want to achieve? So a proactive person forgets about, I mean, if there's something he can do to get somebody else's support, certainly he will do that. He'll proactively talk to the teacher, for example. If he thinks the teacher, if he doesn't understand why the teacher is giving him a certain grade, he would proactively go talk to the teacher. But he would not let the teacher be the impediment for his success. He would find if the teacher, even if he's a jerk, even if he's treating him unfairly, he's going to look for all the ways that he can accomplish what he wants to accomplish, no matter what the teacher's like. Because ultimately, he can't change the teacher if the teacher's not willing to change, right? If the teacher is going to do it a certain way, he might, if it's really extreme, he might go to administration or something like that. But to just, to make his own success dependent on that teacher is not what a proactive person would do. Now, a lot of us, taking a step back, a lot of us are hung up even on the things, the emotions, the things that we kind of were programmed into us in some ways as we were growing up. And that's one of the things we like to blame the most. If we tend to think that we are what we are, a lot of people think that way. We are what we are, and my parents raised me this way. That's just the way it is. Or that's the way my parents always did it, so I do it that way. But and sometimes we're just we don't realize that this paradigm is fooling us. This paradigm is false. We live within that paradigm. That's the way we see the world, and so we can be fooled by these sorts of misconceptions. For example, uh, which block is darker, A or B? We look at A and B, and I don't think there's anybody in this class that thinks that those are the same color, right? Those squares, but they actually are. The A and B at the bottom are the actual colors, but we can't see them that way. Again, I don't think anybody does. These are the actual colors. They've just got extracted and put over there, but we can't see it. The way that it's shaded with the shadow coming over it, what we perceive to be a shadow, we absolutely, even knowing what I just said, knowing that if you extract that, you'll see they're the same color, we cannot see A and B as different colors. We see them, we see them as different colors. We cannot see them as the same color. So there's a lot of things in life that we misperceive. In some cases like this, we showed some, the picture of the old woman, the young woman, and that's a misperception. But that one, at least, you can kind of, after you look at it long enough, you can get through it. This one we can't get through. But most things, if you understand them, you can deal with them. So some of the enemies of proactivity is the social mirror. We see ourselves in a certain way because that's what everybody told us we are. As I think I mentioned before, I worked with migrant students in America, and those migrant students tend to think their future is working in the fields with their parents. That's what their parents. That's why they went to America from Mexico or wherever they were living before. That was their goal, was that the family would start earning a decent living in America, even though it was working hard hours in the field, cutting asparagus or picking apples or cherries or something. That's what they had in their mind. Their parents reinforced it. They never had any thought of going to a university. That was not part of their paradigm. They could not even hardly think about that possibility. And so one of the first things we had to do to break through and get those students going to university is to break the paradigm. But that self-reflective mirror can be very destructive, and sometimes that mirror is actually created by our parents. But it's certainly, I mentioned my friend Dennis again, who was always getting D's in class, but ended up being a college instructor. All of his teachers were creating a social mirror for him. You're stupid, Dennis, you're stupid, stupid, stupid for 12 years. And how, as I said, to me, that one of the biggest miracles is that he didn't believe it, that he somehow broke through that paradigm and was able to become a college instructor. And so to some degree, these social mirrors become somewhat self-predictive. Dr. Covey himself, he was changed by learning about a study in Great Britain. They didn't actually start it as a study. They started it as an accident. But in Great Britain, I may have mentioned this the other day too, I hope not. But anyway, the students all went through an assessment. And the company that was doing the grading and stuff somehow got it mixed up. And so when they sent the assessments back, basically they told the teachers that the stupid kids were the smart ones and the smart kids were the stupid ones. And over the next month or so, this became, that was the mirror that those teachers were reflecting to the students. And lo and behold, the students that were previously considered stupid suddenly start doing miraculously better. Of course, the teachers didn't know, they weren't supposed to. And the students that were smart started doing dramatically worse. Again, the teachers were reflecting somehow in ignorance these feelings, and the students followed. Once they realized the mistake, then suddenly the students reversed and they went back to where they were supposed to be. So they made a study out of this after they made the mistake, and this was a bewildering thing to them that suddenly these students started, especially that the bad students started doing better when their teachers thought they were good students. Meanwhile, Dr. Covey had 10 children. And a lot of his children were really, really smart and really, really good athletes. One of them, uh, he didn't become a star in the National Football League, but he did make his way to the National Football League. Um, and so, he was used to having kids that were quite remarkable. Um, but then they had a child who wasn't. That child just did not learn very fast. And even when they took him to, they put him on a softball team, and the pitcher would pitch the softball real slowly, and he would swing the bat way before the ball even got there. He had no sense of timing at all, and this was embarrassing. He was so bad that it was embarrassing. But he loved the children and everything, and but still, they tried to figure out how to help him, and they gave him some extra coaching. They helped him also with his schoolwork. He wasn't doing very well in his schoolwork, and then he studied. He learned about this study, this British study, and so he sat down with his wife and said, "I think maybe we're reflecting, and we're holding him back by our reflection on him." That we're treating him like he's stupid, that he's uncoordinated, he's a terrible athlete, and we can't pretend. I mean, just pretending that he's not those things doesn't, that seems a little silly. But maybe we just don't reflect at all. Maybe if we can just plain love him like he is and enjoy him like he is, maybe he will progress. Maybe he won't. But even if he doesn't progress, we need to just appreciate the person he is. And so they really worked hard at doing that, just at loving that son. And lo and behold, actually, he was the one that went to the National Football League. He became a star quarterback in college, and like I say, didn't become a star in the NFL, but he was an All-American and had great. They had a lot of success with him as quarterback. He was also a straight A student. Ultimately, he was just a kid who just developed a little bit later than the other kids. So he started looking for this happening in other parts of his life, and wondering if this was what it was doing, how he could be holding people back, and how other people could be doing the same sort of thing, just like the teachers had in that experiment. There's a number of social maps that he talks about. Um, all of them are to some degree deterministic. For example, the genetic determinism, kind of the idea that your DNA makes you what you are, and you can't do anything about it. That there's some sort of psychological determination, that there's somehow your perhaps from your growing up years, how your parents treated you, whatever, that this was deterministic of your future. Environmental determinism goes beyond just your parents to broader environment. But all of these kind of suggest you don't have any option in this. You're just determined by some other things. In fact, even in another class of mine, in a journalism class of mine, more or less, there's a professor from University of California, Berkeley, who basically teaches that very seriously. And there are aspects of it that he does agree that you can fight it. But that's, again, it takes a lot of self-awareness to fight the traps, the mental traps that you stick yourself into, that you get yourself stuck into. So Dr. Covey, as he looked at all these social maps, being proactive, he says, if you want to be proactive, you have to ignore all of them. That even if you are disabled, that's a physical, there's a physical element to it. You can still do things with your physical handicaps that, there have been, obviously, you can probably think of some amazing people in this world who have had severe handicaps, but they still did amazing things. They didn't let those handicaps stop them from achieving success. So even something like that um, can't necessarily stop you. So being proactive, again, as I mentioned, Dr. Covey's habits have kind of become part of American culture. Um, you know where I'm residing, Board City, that's where. Not for long, with a positive mental attitude, I can whip it. I think I'll make a lateral move to self-pity. We're dealing with these emotions and stuff all the time, and a lot of people do make that lateral move to self-pity. That's a reactive way of dealing with life. Just poor me. I'm miserable, and it's somebody else's fault. So Dr. Covey, in talking about proactivity, he he talks about Pavlov's dogs, and he notes that somewhere between stimulus and response, human beings can make another choice. That while animals are not that self-reflective, they sometimes do things that amaze us. That's true, but they don't conscientiously think this through, and say, okay, I'm going to risk my life. They may do it in some sort of automated fashion, but they don't, not really that self-reflective. And people they can be, that somewhere between that stimulus and response that we experience, or the stimulus we experience, we can decide not to do what comes natural to us. We can decide that if somebody punches us in the nose, that we don't punch them back, although that's the reactive thing to do. But you don't have to do that. You can make a decision not to do that, and many other such responses to stimulus. Um, Viktor Frankl was himself a psychologist who believed that we don't have any choices. He was a determinist psychologist. He taught in Austria in the years leading up to World War II. He was also Jewish, and so he and his family were all sent to a Nazi prison camp. And he, in that prison camp, saw many of his friends and family members die. In some cases, they they died, from best he could ascertain, just died from the lack of wanting to live anymore. It was so terrible that it was so painful to see other loved ones killed by the Nazis, and it was so painful to live in a malnourished setting and be humiliated and so forth, stripped down and bathed like a bunch of animals and so forth. They just didn't want to live. And so some people just seem to die from a lack of will to live. And so as he thought about it, he thought about what he could do. And he, first off, he, as in his own life, he started setting aside some time when he could escape the prison camp in his mind. And so he would, go lay down in the barracks and think about the cabin that his family had before the war, before the Nazis took over up in the mountains of Austria, and the joy they shared there, the beauty that was there, the peace that was there. He would also escape to his former classroom and how much he enjoyed teaching the students and the interaction he had with the students. And so in a way, he was able to escape, not physically, but he was able to escape mentally. And then he started wondering how he could help other people in that concentration camp escape in some ways. And so they started a university. There were a lot of smart people there, and so they started teaching classes. And so people had something to do, something to think about, rather than the despair that they felt. And that helped a lot of the people that he was with to survive, was just to forget for a while every day the terror, the misery they were experiencing, and escape into education, and to learn new things, and to prepare for the day they might get out. Of course, they might not, but at least they were progressing as if they were going to get out of that concentration camp someday. Um, But ultimately, he even decided to expand this proactivity to the guards. He got to know the guards and came to understand that many of the guards did not want to be there. They did not want to be um, doing the things that their superiors were ordering them to do. They just as soon open the gates and let people go. But they couldn't do that, at least not do that and survive. And so they were also miserable. They wanted to go home with their families. They wanted the war to end. They didn't want to be part of this. And so he even became friends with some of the guards who were keeping them in the concentration camp. Well, the war ended, and he wrote a famous book about proactivity, on which a lot of other, on which Stephen Covey's book is based to some degree. And he came to believe, he became the anti-determinist then. Because of what he experienced in that concentration camp, he came to believe that we can determine our own future. And he was not the only one. He wrote a book, became famous, but so did other people who have experienced something similar. All these other people that I put in this list up here went through prison camps. Anwar Sadat won the Nobel Peace Prize, but a lot of his life he was created in his mind first when he was thrown into prison as a co-conspirator to get rid of the king of Egypt. But he also learned he could reinvent himself other ways, and he ultimately was killed by somebody who thought he went too far. But he didn't see that war with Israel was a positive thing, and so he ultimately was met with Jimmy Carter and the Prime Minister Begin in America, and they ironed out a peace treaty that has, I believe, has lasted since the 1970s. That Egypt has not been willing to go to war with Israel, and ultimately he was killed by somebody who disagreed with him, another Muslim, who thought he had gone too far in betraying his people. But he determined himself what he wanted to be, what he wanted to do. Mahatma Gandhi, you probably know the story, but he was sent to prison a lot in South Africa before he went back to India to lead the bloodless revolution to give India its freedom. But a lot of what he became was in the prison in South Africa as he thought through how to deal with tyranny. And same with Alexander Solzhenitsyn, was a Nobel Prize winner in literature. When he wrote some of his, at least one of the biggest books, something like 700 pages, I think, or more, he was in a work camp in Siberia. And they would not give him any, all he had was one tiny little sheet of paper. And so to write his book, he wrote it on the little piece of paper, memorized it, then erased it to start the next part of the book. But he also escaped, he said, in fact, one of his reflections was, once people take everything from you, you're free. That's when you're free. Once they take everything, they have nothing else to threaten you with. And so he became free and ultimately, like I say, won the Nobel Prize and lived a number of years in America, sharing his ideals, and then until the Cold War ended, he was able to go back to Russia. And so it makes you wonder, gee, maybe I'm such a failure because I haven't gone to prison yet. But the people have all overcome that sort of environment and become great in spite of it, or perhaps because of it. I don't know. Certainly they were proactive. So proactivity defined the ability to control one's environment rather than have it control you. as is often the case. Self-determination, choice, and the power to decide response to stimuli, conditions, and circumstances. So a proactive person is somebody who takes responsible for everything in his life. Um, I mean, in some cases, he tries to change the circumstances. Obviously, that's part of being proactive. If your circumstances are confining your success, obviously, if somebody's in prison, they'd like to get out of prison, but they don't allow their circumstances to control them any more than absolutely necessary, and they find ways to try to beat those and change those circumstances. Whereas a reactive person blames other people and circumstances for obstacles and problems. So, in between that stimulus and response, there's a self-awareness that other species of animals do not have. There's imagination that you can, even in the bitterest of confinement, they can't stop your imagination without, I mean, at least if they do, I guess you don't have to worry about it. Either you're dead or you're unconscious. But basically, as long as you're conscious, you have an imagination, and that's one of your greatest tools. You have a conscience. It tells you, what's right and wrong, and helps you to determine what's the right course to make. You have independent will. So, all these things, self-awareness, imagination, conscience, independent will, can allow you to not just react, not just lay down and die if you're thrown into a concentration camp, not to stop writing if you still have one little pencil and a sheet of paper, as Solzhenitsyn did. You just find a way. We're going to watch this video. I'll pause this, and this is okay. So you get the idea that even again, this dad couldn't have done anything about the fact that his daughter spilled the coffee, but the rest of the day was caused by his reaction. And thus it is in life in many different respects. Franco couldn't control the fact that he was thrown into a prison camp. He had no control over that. Solzhenitsyn, maybe by not being so proactive before, could have avoided the work camp, maybe, but then he wouldn't be Solzhenitsyn. To be your best self, you have to be in control of your reactions. So part of being proactive, you have to be a solution seller, not just to yourself, sometimes to yourself. You have to sell solutions to yourself in a sense. You have to sell the idea that you're not going to overreact to things, that you're going to go ahead and you're going to take the 90-10 rule into heart and try not to overreact, but to control what you can control and not worry about what you can't control. Just deal with it. And so you use resourcefulness and initiative to do that, to achieve success in that way. I've shared some stories from my own life already. One of them is just a small one to kind of make a point similar to the one the video made. But after I got the contract to work with the Washington State with the migrant students, at first, one of the people, she was actually the person who kind of controlled the grant process that was paying my salary, paying my contract. And she complained about the way I was writing because she didn't know how to write journalistically. She didn't understand that in journalism we have a different approach to writing. And so she complained about it, and I kind of had to push her back a little bit and say, okay, you guys hired me, step back, see what I do. And don't judge me now, judge me by the results. And so once she did, she supported what I did. Everybody supported what I did. Like I say, almost no criticism ever on that. I may have shared this story, I hope not. But anyway, but then one day, about 5 years into my contract, my 7 years I worked with them, I was writing a story about how a university in the state of Washington was not fulfilling its agreement with the migrant program in dealing with them. And so I got a bunch of quotes and I wrote a story, and it was a good story. I wrote it really well. I put a lot of time into it, and I sent it out. Um, the way I handled it was there were quite a few people who you might say stakeholders, and so I would send all of my stories out to like a dozen people for them to review and comment. And every time I sent out my stories, it was the same results. Good job, 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 good job. I'm good at what I do. And so I pretty much came to expect that. Everybody said good job. But then with this story that I wrote about this college and their failure to support the program, it was good job, good job, good job, good job. You can't do it. What? No, you're going to cause problems if you write this story. You can't print this story. This gal, German gal, very, the German gal was hated by everybody, frankly. She was not a people person. She kept the books. She kept track of all the grants that everybody around the state had gotten from the migrant program to help the migrants. But she was not a people person, and she was not tactful. And so she was very blunt, and she had a very blunt response to my story. But even her boss said my story was good. Okay, so the guy over her, I could fight her because her boss said it was good, her peers said it was good, everybody said it was good, except her, in her blunt, rigid way. And so I wrote an email to her. I told her where to go, where she could stick it, pretty much. And I probably spent a couple hours writing that. I'm gonna nail her. She's telling me what to do. And so I get done sometime around midnight. And then I pause a second and I tell myself, you better wait till morning before you send this email. Think about this overnight. And so I went to bed and I woke up in the morning and I go, darn, she's right. And so instead I went back and rewrote my email and said, dear Sharon, I really appreciate, nobody else gives me constructive criticism. When I send this out to everybody else, they just give me positive response, positive. I mean, you're the only one that takes the time to really read closely and think about it and to give me the critical response that I need to do my job better. And I really appreciate it. It was hard for me to write those words because part of me was still a little bit mad at her. And I had spent a lot of time writing this story, but I sent it to her. And then suddenly I was her best friend. She was sending me emails about her trip to Europe. I was the one person in that whole state that had ever thanked her for being mean, basically. And so she was recommending that the state, increase my grant and that I get to do other stuff. Anyway, she was my best buddy then, which was very strange. But that would not have happened. I don't know what would have happened if I had sent the first email. It might have caused me to lose that contract. Ultimately, they closed it down with the 2008 recession, but it didn't have anything to do with the quality of work. I got excellent letters of recommendation from them, and that's when I went to Kazakhstan to start teaching. But and probably their letters helped me get the job in Kazakhstan. The fact that even this gal, Sharon, wrote me a wonderful letter, one of the best letters, when I no longer had that contract and was able to go someplace else instead. But anyway, it was just one of those experiences in my own life where I had to fight my own natural reaction, where, like I said, the natural reaction was to fight. I'd done a good job. I knew I put a lot of work into it, and 11 out of 12 people said it was wonderful. I had lots of ammunition, but I wasn't right. That's the problem. She was right. It would have caused problems with the college. She would have been mad at me. The college would have been mad at them. They would have complained about the story. Who knows what kind of snowball effect it would have had. But not a positive one, I'm sure. So we have to decide to act or be acted upon. As we are proactive, then we become the actors. If we allow ourselves to be reactors, then we're acted upon. We have our environment always acting on us rather than we controlling the environment. And it takes some practice. I can think back to a number of times, a number of things in my career where I could have changed my story by not reacting. Um, the thing I might not be here if I changed that story, but my life would be different if there are different times when I had a chance to be proactive and I wasn't. I was reactive. I think we all have those experiences, but it takes a while to develop your proactive muscles, as he says. As he said, it's not really positive thinking. It requires more creativity and resourcefulness, and it requires humility, self-examination, being willing to look at things fairly, and to consider the possibility that you're wrong, but also consider possibilities that it doesn't matter. I mean that whatever is happening to you, you can deal with it and find other with your creativity and resourcefulness, you can go ahead and achieve what you want to achieve anyway. And in my case, yeah, I mean, it turned totally around. I didn't need that story. It didn't really matter that I had to rewrite that story. But instead of having to deal with an enemy, I now suddenly turned somebody who could be an enemy, who was a potential enemy, into a friend. And you never have enough friends. And I also did not, as she warned me, I did not cause an enemy with the college I was going to criticize. And so that protected me from having her be an enemy and protected me from causing problems with that college that I was criticizing. So it was just better all the way around. But I had to have some humility to react to change my decision. First off, to say, okay, give me some space. Let me think about this without hitting that send button that night, and then to by morning time realize I was simply wrong, that she was right. Um, People who are reactive say things like, "There's nothing I can do. That's just the way I am. He makes me so mad." That sort of language is always somebody else's fault. Whereas the person who's proactive is saying things like, "Well, let's look at the alternatives. Um, I can choose a different approach. I control my own feelings." These are proactive sort of things. In some cases, it might be when somebody's angry with you, for example, or criticizing you, is help me understand uh, what you're thinking. Explain it to me, um, and honestly listen to them, and so that the anger that sometimes people are angry at you because they think you're going to be angry back at them. That's why they come in angry already. And if all you say is, if you calmly say, "Okay, help me understand what's troubling you, so I can fix it. I want to fix whatever it is. If I did something wrong, I want to fix it. What happened?" And just by opening the door for them to explain their problem is all that's necessary to change the whole scenario. Here's some more of the language that I can't, I must, if only sort of language. If you're reactive, I choose, I prefer, I will, um, are more proactive terms that we would use. I'll let you study that in your own. What we find also is as we are become proactive people, uh, we have a circle of concern, and we start off with a fairly small circle of influence, but proactive people automatically build their circle of influence. They may not understand how it even happens, but that circle of influence grows and grows and grows. In some cases, it may be even beyond what is good for them, maybe beyond what they would really want. But if people is kind of, I was explaining, telling you the story about how I became the chairman of the research uh, conference in Kazakhstan, just by being willing to do something, being proactive. I was proactively just doing stuff to help, and I didn't know any different. I didn't know that wasn't normal. I never even thought about it until, like I said, that week before the conference, when suddenly that 7 things had to be done, and the chairman decided I had to do 4 of them because I was the one he could trust, and the other 11 people in the room could only do 3 of them. That's just being proactive. And as I said, it shocked me that it came to that, because these are all professors in this room and department deans and so forth, or college deans, and they're not dependable. What's going on here? I just presumed everybody was dependable, and so that's why it was a shock to me when suddenly they're wanting me to be the MC and wanting me to do all this stuff. And it was just, I was the one that they could trust to do it. I didn't even think about it. But as you become that person, as you're the guy or the gal that people trust, then they give you more responsibility. Especially, I mean, the people above you want you to have more responsibility, because why? You're the one they trust. You're the proactive person. You're the problem solver. You're the person who says you'll do it, and you try to use your creativity to do it, while other people are sitting on their behinds. And they might say they're going to do it, and they don't do it. And so you're the one they trust to do it. You're the proactive person, and so they want you to do more and more, even if that wasn't your intention at all. It just comes natural. Um, let's flip through some of these. So you want to be a little more like Gandhi than a little bit less than some other people. He found a problem and he just handled it in a very creative way. He ultimately, led India to its independence from Great Britain, without firing a shot. I had some other experiences. One, actually from Covey, he talks about, but I can really relate to it because I've been in companies like this where the manager, the CEO, whoever is running the place is not a very good people person and is making bad decisions that are hurting the company. And what happens is then everybody starts talking about him, and they'll gather around the water cooler or whatever, and hey, they start talking about, and they spread the word, about how stupid the boss is and all this sort of stuff. And that was happening in this one company until one guy, hearing everything, he decided he was going to do something about it. He was going to be proactive. And so he got his work done. He always did his work as best he could, as dependably as he could. So as he got his work done, he would go hand whatever it was to the boss, and he'd say, "Is there anything I can do for you? I've got this work done. I've got a little more time. What can I do to help you?" And the boss at first didn't take him seriously. Nobody offers to do more work, and so he just kind of ignored him a little bit, because he didn't. That was not normal. People don't offer to do more work. And so, but after a while, after a few times they did it, he finally did give him some more extra work to do. And he completed it, and he did a good job. Kind of like what I was doing with the research conference. And then he said, he came back and did it again, and did some more, and did some more. Pretty soon, the boss was totally dependent on this guy. But now, rather than just, you could think, if that person, what are the workers going to think? The other employees. They have some bad names for people like this, right? But then that person went back to the employees. Said, okay, what can I do? What are the concerns that you guys have that I can help resolve with the boss? Because now the boss trusted him. And so he went back to the employees and he started problem solving for them. They would have a problem. He'd go back to the boss and explain what was happening. The boss would trust him now. And so the whole company became better. The employees were happier. The boss was happier. and he was just right there in the middle, the proactive person that's necessary to make it work. And so the company now started doing a lot better. We talked about that experience of mine, but in Kazakhstan, there were other things beyond. Besides the research conference, after that, um, I think I mentioned that somebody came to me with the idea of working on a project to help non-government organizations. And that has now, after 10 years, we've gotten $10 million worth of support from different international donors. And it's now the project we named Insights into Development is now being funded to provide support to non-government organizations throughout Central Asia. And we're building training on a website that people can go and get better trained to do their job with the NGOs, stuff like that. It was my idea to do it, but even I could not imagine what was going to happen to it. And when the Peace Corps worker came to me, she just wanted to do it one time and write one book. And being a proactive person, I just said, I'll work with you, but we're not going to go into this thinking this is a one time only. We're going to go into this thinking this is forever. This is a good idea. You have the idea, but it's a better idea than what you're thinking. Let's build it to keep going. And so it's still going. And they'll have me send them a video to welcome people to their conference, or I would write a chapter most years for the book that they publish. And so 10 books, 10 years of conferences, website to do trainings for the NGO workers and so forth. Beyond what I imagined it would be. But it took some imagination to think. My seed of imagination was this could be bigger. Let's try it. Let's see what happens. And it happened. It took on a life of its own. The Chamber of Commerce, they were in Kazakhstan, as in here, and also Malaysia. There's a American Chamber of Commerce of different countries. So here, there's an American Chamber of Commerce of Malaysia. There's a American Chamber of Commerce of Kazakhstan. And I just volunteered to do a couple of things. And pretty soon they're asking me to head up the corporate social responsibility committee and do all sorts of stuff from that. I think I mentioned I get a phone call from the ambassador from Great Britain wanting to come talk to me. And I don't even know why. I've never met her. She's brand new to the country. I don't know who recommended me. I thought, well, she's coming to KEMEP. It's one of the best universities in the country. She's going to come and meet with a bunch of people. And she wasn't. She was coming to meet with me, and I had to almost force her to go meet the president because she had no intention of meeting the president or anybody else at the university. Somebody told her that I was a person to talk to figure out what's going on in the country. I don't know who told her that. And then the National Investment Corporation. National Investment Corporation is a subsidiary of the National Bank of Kazakhstan. And right before I came here, I got a call from them a few months before I came here. And they said, we want to hire you to consult with us. Well, I didn't know who the National Investment Corporation was, but they are responsible for investing about $80 billion a year in oil money. And again, I had no idea who recommended me. I wasn't applying for the job, but they wanted me to help them do their job better. Well, okay, in this case, they were paying me, so I agreed to do that. But sometimes, like I said, it's kind of weird how this takes on. If you become a proactive person, you might actually start getting more than you want, and you may have to start saying no at some point, because these were not like the National Investment Corporation. It was nice to make a little extra money, and it's fun to be part of that, be part of an organization that's investing $80 billion. Never been involved with a company or organization like that, but it was still a little bit beyond my sphere of concern, I put it that way. Anyway, just kind of redundant to what I've been saying, that important part of this is trust, building trust in people where they believe that if you commit to doing something, you'll do it, and you'll do it well. Doesn't mean you're the best person at it. I definitely am not the best person in a lot of things I've done in my life. But somehow somebody spread the word that Dr. Ken gets it done. And so they come to me and ask me for, to help them with stuff. And sometimes it boggles my mind. So your circle of influence grows and grows, and it is possible that it can grow beyond your circle of concern. So I wanted to share from another PowerPoint here. Checking the time here. Yeah, we should have time. This is a story. Well, one of the things that Dr. Covey says in his book is that a proactive person can be 5,000% more effective than a reactive person. I read that and I thought, nah, that's not true. That's a lot, 5,000%. But then I read the story about Johnny the Bagger. A bagger at a grocery store in America is the person that puts groceries in the bag after the cashier takes the money and gives the people their change, and meanwhile the bagger's here putting groceries in a bag. Johnny was a bagger, and you might be able to detect from his face that he not a normal bagger. He has probably an IQ of something, again, kind of like my nephew. IQ somewhere around 60, 70%, something like that. He's never going to be the manager. But this is the story of Johnny the Bagger. And I'm going to need to go to a different place here. And let me just stop this a second and go to the... Okay, so this is a story by this gal is Barbara Glantz, and she is a customer service professional. So anyway, a few years ago, she was hired by this is in her words, I was hired by a large supermarket chain to lead a customer service program to build customer loyalty. Let me go back there. During my speech, I said, every one of you can make a difference and create memories for your customers that will motivate them to come back. Put your personal signature on the job. Think about something you can do for your customer to make them feel special, a memory that will make them come back. About a month after I had spoken, I received a call from a 19-year-old bagger named Johnny. He proudly informed me that he was a Down syndrome individual and told me this story. I liked what you talked about, he said, but at first I didn't think I could do anything special for our customers. After all, I'm just a bagger. Then I had an idea, Johnny said. Every night after work, I'd come home and find a thought for the day. If I can't find a saying I like, he added, I just think one up. When Johnny had a good thought for the day, his dad helped him set up the computer and print multiple copies. Johnny cut out each quote and signed his name on the back. Then he'd bring them to work the next day. When I finished bagging someone's groceries, I'd put my thought for the day in their bag and say, thanks for shopping with us. It touched me to think that this young man with a job most people would say is not important made it important by creating precious memories for all his customers. A month later, the store manager called me. You won't believe what happened. When I was making my rounds today, I found Johnny's checkout line was 3 times longer than anyone else's. It went all the way down the frozen food aisle, so I quickly announced, we need more cashiers, get more lanes open, as I tried to get people to change lanes, but no one would move. They said, no, it's okay. We want to be in Johnny's lane. We want to be in Johnny's lane. We want his thought for the day. The store manager continued, "It was a joy to watch Johnny delight the customers. I got a lump in my throat when one woman said, 'I used to shop at your store once a week, but now I come in every time I go by because I want to get Johnny's thought for the day.' A few months later, the manager called me again. 'Johnny has transformed our store. Now when the floral department has a broken flower or unused corsage, they find an elderly woman or a little girl and pin it on them. Everyone's having a lot of fun creating memories. Our customers are talking about us. They're coming back and bringing their friends.' A wonderful spirit of service spread throughout the entire store, and all because Johnny chose to make a difference. Johnny's idea wasn't nearly as innovative as it was loving. It came from his heart. It was real. That's what touched his customers, his peers, and those who read this story. Great service comes from the heart. Will you be a Johnny today?" So, was Johnny 5,000% more effective than the other people in that store? He was. Johnny was 5,000% more effective than the other people in the store. He changed the destiny of that store, and that store was one of a chain. He changed the destiny of a chain of stores. A very unlikely person to change the destiny of a big business like that. But he's the one who was proactive. Everybody else listened to that presentation made by Barbara Glantz and walked away and did nothing. Nobody except Johnny did anything. And Johnny changed everything. So after I thought about Johnny, I thought, he's right. A proactive person can be 5,000% more effective than a reactive person. Let's see, we're running out of time here. Got a little more time. Well, I guess we should stop there anyway. You can watch, this is probably one that I have scheduled for this week anyway. The sign-up sheet. The sign-up sheet out there for the presentation. Has everybody signed up? Okay. Who has not signed up for a group? Anybody either? Okay. Click on there and decide where you want to get on there. We need to get started on these, or we're going to end up having to double up on a lot of days and not have enough time for anything else. So I would like to get the first one. I'd like to go in order, and so what much of a team do we have for the first topic here? Okay, it looks like we have a team set up for the first topic. I would like, my preference would be for team one to present in like 2 weeks. I know that may be pushing a little bit, and then we go from there, and then we get to the end of the semester, we're going to have to probably have 2 a week. But starting the semester, I would like to get going, so week 5 would start, because then we only have, with week 5, we have, well, counting week 5, we'd have 11 weeks. Well, it wouldn't be week 5, it's this 4, so it'd actually be week 6 would be starting. So we have exactly 10 weeks, and we've got about 15 subjects. So towards the end of the semester, we're going to have to double up. But we'll start off. So if week 1 can plan to do it, and I will, I always grade easier for those that actually start early in the semester, because I realize you're under a little bit of a gun, so to speak. So if team 1 will prepare for 2 weeks from today, our week 6, and then team 2 plan on week 7, and once we have this all done, I'll announce the weeks of the rest of the way through. But at least for the first I would say at least for the first 4 weeks, well, once we get started, teams 1, 2, 3, and 4 will be in consecutive weeks. Again, keep it down to about 20 minutes. You're finding just the very most interesting stuff out of your chapter. A lot of the book chapters are like 30 pages long. You can't present 30 pages in 20 minutes. Don't try to. You will be judged in part by your selection material from your chapter. If you choose stuff that's boring, and I'm bored, then you'll get a lower grade. So don't bore me. Make it interesting. You can't, like I said, you cannot present the entire chapter. I don't want you to try to present the entire chapter. I want you to pick and choose from your material and make it interesting. Include what you feel are the most important things in that chapter for the class. And the only person you can really base that on is your own feelings, your own gut instinct, so to speak. So you decide what you think is interesting. Now, if I see the whole class getting bored, I'm going to think, I guess they guessed wrong, right? If people are sleeping in the middle of your presentation, then that tells me that you didn't choose well. So choose carefully, choose well, present well, and we'll go over that in more detail later. I don't think we have time today to go through. There is the criteria. The criteria are posted in your work assignments at the top of our Moodle website. You can look at that, and we'll talk about that a little bit, I guess, next week before the first presentation. Help you understand a little better about what I'm looking for. There is a video already posted that also talks about that. I already set up a video from a previous semester talking about that. It should be at the top, towards the top of the web page as well. So, yeah. Anyway, do a good job. Make it fun. Make it interesting. Have enthusiasm. The first person you have to decide that you have to convince that this is interesting is yourself. Convince yourself that what you're presenting is interesting, and that goes a long ways towards making the rest of us believe it. And then get us interested in it. Find the most interesting stuff. There's some stuff you're just going to leave out. For example, I think I mentioned this already earlier in the semester, but the book talks quite a bit. First off, it's an American perspective, so there's stuff that just doesn't relate. So if it's from a totally American perspective that doesn't rate to our university, don't include it. I mentioned that it also talks about students who are married and have working and stuff like that. We hardly have any students, if we have any, they're very few and far between, that are working full time or married and have a bunch of children they have to worry about. There just aren't very many of you who are in that category. So these non-traditional students, as the book refers to them, we probably need to talk about them. Think about the challenges you have, and that most of the people here have, and those are the people we want to concentrate on. Okay, so we do. Let me see. I remember what I timed this on. We do have a quiz set up, and let me see when it starts. I've put the time frame for 12 minutes, but you only get 10 minutes to do it. There's 10 questions, 10 minutes. So it's starting at 3:38. So it's not. We have a couple minutes here before it will start. Any questions on the presentation?
Can you give us the actual date of our presentation later? The actual date, so 1 week only, one presentation per week.
Yeah, for now, that's what we're working on. The rest of the schedule, maybe next week after I take a look at it. But the main thing to know is the first 4 groups will be in consecutive weeks. The first one in 2 weeks from today, then the second one 3 weeks from today, the third one 3 weeks from today, and so forth. So that much you should be able to figure out. And then before then, I'll give you the whole schedule for everybody. As I said, I will be a little bit kinder in my grading for the first couple of groups, just because they're not getting as much time to prepare. So don't worry too much about that. Any other questions? Let me just end the lecture then just by saying that explain that Dr. Covey puts these in order. Some of them could be in different orders. I would argue, I think I mentioned the other day, I would argue that habit 4, which is think, when, could go to 5, and habit 5, which is seek first, understand, then to be understood. Those could easily switch places. But these first ones really are in the right order for sure. The first one being proactive is the foundation for all the rest of the course. If you don't believe that you can change your lives, that you can determine what your future is with the right attitude, with the right ideas, with the building on the right principles, as Dr. Covey talks about, if you don't think you can change your life and achieve success by being more proactive, as I said, even Johnny gained success. There's no Johnnies in this room. As far as his lack of capabilities, every one of you is more capable than Johnny was. But even Johnny changed his little piece of the world by being proactive. So there's not anybody in this room that can't change their lives in such a way, if you become proactive, that you can't achieve a lot more than you think you can. And then building from there, we'll talk about subsequent habits after that. But all the foundation is being proactive. The foundation is believing that you can do it. And then taking the sort of action you have to do to change your world, whatever it is you're trying to be and become. You can do it. As I've recited these different experiences of mine, I can absolutely guarantee you I was not the best qualified person to do a lot of the stuff that I did. But I was the one saying, okay, I'll do it, and doing my best. I absolutely believe that. I mean, I know I'm not even in that upper half of people that would make a good MC. But they asked me to do it, I do it. I do have a problem saying no. That can actually be a problem. When your circle of influence goes beyond your circle of interest, then it can actually be a problem. But anyway, okay. Well, we're about to. So this will be open for 12 minutes, but as soon as you get into the quiz, you have 10 minutes. So everybody has only 10 minutes to do it, but it opens at 3:38 in just less than a minute. And then you have 10 minutes as soon as you start it, you have 10 minutes, but it will end at 3:50. So you need to get started within a minute or so when it opens up. Okay. Good. It should be open now, or real close. If not, just a second, it should be open momentarily.